Papoose sat down on a national radio show this week and said the words nobody expected to ever come out of his mouth after 20 months of scorched earth. He said he wishes Remy Ma the best. He said there is no animosity. He said the cheating accusations do not even add up when you look at the history. And this is the same man who, in December of 2024, posted a public statement calling his wife a narcissist and a serial cheater, and then posted photographs he claimed were receipts of her with another man on Christmas. Both of those things came from the same person. Both of those things cannot be true. One of them is a fact and the other one is a product, and I am going to show you exactly which is which. Because here is what almost nobody caught in that appearance. The confession was not about the marriage. The confession was about the story. For nearly 2 years, the entire Papoose defense has been built on a single load-bearing wall, the claim that he wrote 90% of the rhymes that came out of Remy Ma's mouth. That is a claim he made on a live stream, in front of the world, about a Grammy-nominated Terror Squad lyricist. On April 10th of this year, Remy walked into On the Radar and detonated it on record. In July, she came back for the ashes. And what Papoose did in response is the single most revealing thing that has happened in this entire saga. He did not defend the 90%. He pivoted to engineering credits. Everybody has been watching the relationship. You should have been watching the resume. Because when we get to the part where I lay his own label position next to the reported $8 million signing that walked through his door, you are going to understand why the divorce is still not finalized, why he cannot stop appearing on podcasts, and why the phrase career over is not hyperbole in this case. It is arithmetic. Stay with me, because the receipts here are not the messy ones everybody already screenshotted. The receipts are in the paperwork, the ledger, and the catalog. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Let me set this table properly, because the internet has been running the wrong version of the timeline for a year and a half, and it is why nobody can make sense of what is happening. Papoose, born Shamil Mackey, is a Brooklyn lyricist, 47 years old, more than 2 decades deep in the game, a legendary mixtape technician forever bonded to the late DJ K. Slay. Remy Ma, born Reminisce Smith, is a Bronx MC, a Terror Squad alum, a Grammy-nominated pen, and one of the most respected female lyricists in the history of the genre. Not a respected female rapper, a respected rapper. They met in 2004, cutting a record in New York. That collaboration turned into a courtship. Then in 2007 she caught a shooting case, was sentenced to 8 years, and served 6. And Papoose did the thing that built his entire public brand. He stayed. He drove upstate. He took the collect calls. They intended to marry in 2008, the ceremony was derailed by her incarceration, and they made it official over the phone. She came home in 2014. They held their formal wedding in February of 2016. Their daughter, Reminisce Mackenzie, arrived in December of 2018. For the better part of a decade, the culture held these two up as the gold standard. Not because it was marketing, but because it looked real, and hip-hop almost never gets to point at something that looks real. That is the equity we are talking about. That is what was on the balance sheet before any of this started. Now understand what happened to it. On December 12th of 2024, Remy Ma went to Instagram and posted alleged screenshots accusing Papoose of an affair with Claressa Shields, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, a multi-division world champion, arguably the greatest woman to ever put on gloves. Papoose responded with a statement calling her a narcissist who chose to cheat repeatedly, saying he had requested a divorce numerous times. Remy said she was the one with the bag. Papoose posted what he described as receipts of her infidelity from the previous Christmas. Claressa jumped on X, called it clown behavior, and offered to fight Remy on February 2nd. In May of 2025, Papoose formally filed, citing irreconcilable differences and infidelity, and posted the paperwork. And here is the fault line that everything in this video runs along. As this is being recorded, that divorce has still not produced a final decree. Not a delay of weeks. We are talking about a filing from May of 2025 sitting unresolved into the back half of 2026, during which time his partner reportedly flashed a ring on a November livestream and said the word engaged before walking it back to, Papoose hasn't proposed yet. So the stakes are not gossip. Musically, this is a fight over authorship, who actually wrote the bars that built a career. Financially, it is a fight over an unfinalized asset division involving a 20-year marriage. Culturally, it is a referendum on whether the culture's most celebrated loyalty story was ever real. And reputationally, for Papoose specifically, it is existential, because his product is his pen. Which leaves us with one question that this entire breakdown is going to answer. Why would a man who says there is no animosity, who says he wishes her the best, who says everything is settled, still be sitting on unfinished paperwork 14 months after he filed it? Let's go to the visible record, and I want to do this in order, because the escalation is the story. Piece 1, the December 2024 detonation. Remy Ma posts an alleged screenshot and writes that Papoose fell asleep on the phone with Claressa Shields, in her house, a house she says he refused to leave. She follows it with a second alleged screenshot of texts and a line that is genuinely surgical, that she is the woman who never stepped off on him in 17 years while he was allegedly plotting with one of his chicks to destroy her. Papoose's answer was not a denial of the relationship. Read it again. His answer was a character indictment of her. Does everybody see what happened there? He was accused of a specific act and he responded with a diagnosis. That is the first appearance of the pattern that runs through this entire situation. When confronted with a specific, he answers with a category. Piece 2, the May 2025 filing and the paperwork performance. He files, he cites infidelity, and he posts it. Now, filing is real. I am not going to pretend a filing is nothing. But the day after Claressa Shields sat on the Breakfast Club and called his marriage the elephant in the room, Remy Ma went on Instagram Live and did something that should have ended the entire conversation. She said Papoose has her lawyer's information, that his lawyer had not been retained yet, and that if he could not afford it, she would pay for the divorce herself. She said if someone who loves him over there wants to pay for it, great, that will make her happy. She said everything is signed and ready to go. She said she wants nothing, no child support, no assistance. Stop and process what that means. The woman being framed as the obstacle publicly offered to fund her own divorce and asked for $0. And the case still did not close. Can we have an honest conversation about what that leaves as the only remaining explanation? Piece 3, the 90% claim. During an extended live-streamed rant, Papoose told the public that he had written 90% of the rhymes that came out of Remy Ma's mouth. Not helped. Not co-wrote. 90%. That is not a shot in a domestic dispute. That is a professional accusation against a Grammy-nominated MC, and in this genre it is the accusation. It is the one thing you cannot walk back. And notice what it reveals about his read of the situation. He understood that attacking her marriage would cost him public sympathy, so he went after her catalog instead. He was not trying to win the argument. He was trying to devalue the asset. Piece 4, and this is where it turns from messy to fatal. On Friday, April 10th of this year, Remy Ma premiered a freestyle called WYFL, Why You F***ing Lying, with On the Radar. And she did not swing wildly. She aimed at the 90% with a scalpel. The nerve of these dudes claiming they wrote those hits when their whole career they never ghost wrote anything, not for her or anybody else, always acting like you help somebody, go help yourself. That is the entire defense collapsing in 4 bars. Because here is the thing about a ghostwriting claim, it is verifiable. It has a paper trail. Splits, publishing registrations, session logs, engineer credits, profilings. If you wrote 90% of somebody's catalog, the documentation exists in 15 places and none of it requires you to say a word. And the initial Instagram reel for that freestyle reportedly drew north of 90,000 comments. 90,000. That is not a rap beef metric. That is a cultural event. Piece 5, July of this year, The Pivot. When the ghostwriting conversation reignited around July 16th, Papoose posted what he framed as his own receipt, and the substance of it was reportedly that the track in question had been previously recorded and that he engineered the record. Engineered. Do you understand the size of that retreat? 90% of the rhymes became a session credit. That is not a clarification. That is a man quietly abandoning the biggest claim he ever made because the documentation to support it does not exist, and hoping the internet's attention span covers the exit. And then, days later, on July 20th, he walked into the Breakfast Club and delivered the part everyone is calling a confession. And oh, I have so much more for you, because the confession itself is not even the worst part. The worst part is what he said to justify himself, and it is the single most self-incriminating sentence of this entire 2-year run, and I promise you we are getting to it in about 90 seconds. The people who have spent 18 months in comment sections calling this black love, telling everybody to leave grown folks alone, are really, genuinely not going to enjoy this next stretch, because I am not going to be talking about the relationship at all. I am going to be talking about receipts, splits, and a reported $8 million signature, and there is no version of that conversation where the romance framing survives. And to the people who keep telling me Remy is bitter and needs to move on, she released a single last month. She is in her own era. She was on the record saying she is having the most fun she has had in her life. Sit with that while I lay out what the culture has actually been saying, because the culture already reached a verdict and Papoose is the only person still litigating. Let's go into the cultural layer, because this is where the picture changes shape. First piece, the receipts war of December 2024 did not just involve 2 people, it pulled in the entire ecosystem, and the ecosystem picked immediately. Remy said Claressa's publicity apparatus was feeding fake stories to the press to make her look bad and Papoose look innocent, and said she had asked her husband directly to post something to stop the narrative and was told to stay quiet. Whether or not you believe that, look at what the following 18 months of coverage actually looked like. A steady stream of soft focus features about a couple entering a new year together, planning a baby, celebrating anniversaries, while the man in the photographs was legally married to somebody else. That is not an accident of journalism. That is placement. Second piece, the head tap verse. In September of last year, Remy hopped on Connie Diamond's record and stopped subtweeting. You're number 2 and you're mad I'm the one. It ain't my fault you're a dusty and bum, and why would I fight you when I got a gun? A direct reference to Claressa's repeated public offers to square up. And I need everybody to catch the strategy in that, because it is not just insult. She established a hierarchy. Number 2. As long as that decree isn't signed, that is not an opinion, it is a legal status, and everybody listening understood it instantly. Third piece, the response pattern from the other side, which has been the loudest tell in the whole thing. When Remy posted her now infamous, "Please refrain from speaking" message in May of 2025, the one where she itemized his 4 biological children by age and noted he had finally agreed to divorce 18 hours, 54 minutes and 3 seconds earlier, Claressa Shields responded on X within 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Saying she will say what she wants, that they are going to have a family, that Remy is still invited to the cookout as long as she has a good attitude. And people read that as confidence. I read it as reaction time. Confident people do not answer in 45 minutes. Confident people do not need to announce that they are happy. There is a whole genre of people online insisting they are unbothered at a volume that only bothered people can reach. Fourth piece, the outside world started keeping score, and it got embarrassing. 50 Cent, a man who does this for sport, spent this year turning Papoose into a running bit. It started in January with the two of them trading AI-generated videos. Papoose escalated with a freestyle over the Many Men instrumental and then a full diss record called Agent Provocateur. And Curtis, who said he would not respond, then posted a face-swapped photo of Papoose and Claressa with a caption that made an allegation about a G-Unit affiliate and claimed he had Ring camera footage. Now I want to be clear, that is an unverified taunt from a man whose entire genius is psychological warfare, and I am not presenting it as fact. But look at the strategic reality it created. Papoose has spent 2026 fighting a two-front war, defending a relationship's legitimacy on one side and defending his catalog's authorship on the other, against a mogul who owns distribution infrastructure and against a lyricist who owns 20 years of receipts on him. And here is the counterargument I actually respect, so let me give it real weight. People will say Papoose is a victim in this too, that he was cheated on, that Remy was reportedly connected to battle rapper Easy the Block Captain, that he stood by a woman through a 6-year prison sentence and earned the right to leave. And you know what? Every bit of the loyalty part is documented and it is real. He did stay. That is history. But that is exactly why the 90% claim is unforgivable rather than just petty. A man who was genuinely wronged does not need to attack his wife's authorship. Being cheated on does not require you to claim you wrote her catalog. Those two grievances have nothing to do with each other. The moment he reached for the pen instead of the pain, he told us the real injury was professional, not personal. And fifth, the most damning cultural data point of all, and it landed this month. He went on national radio and said the cheating accusations do not add up when you look at the history, pointing out that during the 6 years she was incarcerated there was never a single rumor attached to his name, because they always lived transparently. That is a beautiful argument. It is also an argument that both of them are innocent. He just used their shared history as character evidence for the woman he called a narcissist and a serial cheater in writing. And he said he wishes her the best. And they were reportedly seen together, peacefully, celebrating their daughter's birthday. Which means the entire 2-year war was, by his own final testimony, unnecessary. That is the confession. Not a confession of an affair, a confession that the narrative was a construction. And now I need to shift gears completely, because none of this makes sense until you stop looking at the relationship and start looking at the business, and the business is where this stops being gossip and becomes something the industry should be studying. Here is systemic angle number 1, and it is the one nobody in a host chair will touch, the ownership question underneath a ghostwriting claim. In this business, a bar is not a sentiment, it is an asset with a registration number. When you claim authorship of a catalog, you are not making a social media insult, you are making a claim adjacent to publishing. Composition splits, writer shares, pro registrations at BMI or ASCAP, mechanical royalties, sync licensing revenue, all of it flows from documented authorship. So when a man says on a live stream that he wrote 90% of his estranged wife's rhymes, in the middle of an unfinalized divorce involving asset division from a 20-year marriage, that statement is not emotional. That statement is positional. Now hear me clearly, because I'm labeling this as analysis and not as fact. I have seen no filing, no claim, and no reporting indicating Papoose has pursued any legal claim to Remy Ma's publishing. What I am telling you is that the language he chose maps precisely onto the vocabulary of an ownership argument, and that the timing of it, during an open, unresolved dissolution is not the timing of a man venting. It is the timing of a man building a record. And the reason it collapsed is beautiful in its simplicity. Publishing is documentary. Splits either exist or they do not. Which is why, when it came time to produce something in July, what he produced was reportedly an engineering credit and a claim about when a track was recorded. Engineering is a technical service. It generates no writer share. Going from 90% of the rhymes to I engineered it is going from claiming ownership of a house to confirming you fixed the wiring. Systemic angle number 2, the economics of the position he currently occupies, and this is where the $8 million number becomes unavoidable. Papoose is not just a rapper right now. He holds a real executive position on the hip-hop side of a label operation and has had a weekly satellite radio presence. Those are legitimate industry seats. Now put next to that the reporting from late last year that Claressa Shields signed to his label in what was described as a historic $8 million deal, celebrated publicly, with Papoose telling her he loves her to death. Understand what that structurally means, and I want to be precise here because this is the most important 60 seconds of this video. When your romantic partner is also a signed artist on the imprint where you hold an executive title, the relationship is no longer only a relationship. It is a business relationship with a reported 8-figure valuation attached to it. That means the public performance of the romance is not separate from the business. It is promotional infrastructure for it. Every podcast appearance where he gushes is a marketing impression for a signing. Every red carpet is an asset value maintenance event. And here is why the divorce delay stops looking like negligence and starts looking like a variable. An unfinalized dissolution of a 20-year marriage means asset division has not been settled. It means whatever new revenue arrives during the pendency of that case exists in a legally ambiguous window. I am not alleging that anybody is timing anything. I want that on the record. That is speculation and I am labeling it as such. What I am telling you as a matter of structure is that a man with a fresh executive stake in reported $8 million deal has a materially different incentive around finalizing a marital asset division than a man with nothing incoming. That is not a moral claim. That is how dissolution math works. And when the other party has publicly offered to pay for the divorce herself and asked for nothing, the delay has exactly one remaining home, and it is not her side of the table. Systemic angle number 3, the couch cartel, and my frustration here is real. There is now an entire economy of hip-hop podcast and radio platforms whose business model requires unresolved conflict. Resolution is bad inventory. A settled story generates one clip. An unsettled story generates clips forever. So consider what has happened over 18 months. He has appeared on the biggest platforms in this culture repeatedly, and I want somebody to show me the interview where a host looked at him and asked the one question a competent journalist asks. You filed in May of 2025, your wife publicly offered to pay for it, she says everything is signed, so what specifically is the outstanding obstacle in the case? That question has a factual answer. It would take 15 seconds to ask. It has not been asked, because the answer either ends the storyline or ends the booking relationship, and the couch cartel does not sell truth, it sells recurrence. Some people will tell me that is not the host's job, that they are not lawyers, that personal matters are off limits. That is a cop-out and I am going to name it as one. You cannot book a man for 2 years specifically because of his personal situation, build entire content cycles around his personal situation, monetize his personal situation with pre-roll and mid-roll, and then claim his personal situation is too private to examine. You do not get to have the crop and refuse the harvest. And there is a fourth layer stacked on top of all of it, which is the historical pattern this fits into and nobody wants to name. Aging male artists with declining independent revenue attaching themselves to ascendant, well-capitalized women and converting that proximity into a platform is one of the oldest structures in entertainment. What makes the hip-hop version uniquely slippery is the genre's gender accounting. When a male rapper is the financial engine, the culture calls him a provider and a king. When a woman is the engine, the culture is trained to call it love and stop asking questions. That asymmetry is not a side note. It is the loophole. And it has been load-bearing for 18 months of coverage. So here it is. Here is the sentence this entire breakdown has been walking toward, and I want you to sit in it with me, because it is bigger than a marriage and bigger than a rumor. Papoose did not lose this because of Claressa Shields. He did not lose this because of infidelity, on either side, alleged or otherwise. Papoose lost this the moment he claimed he wrote 90% of Remy Ma's rhymes, because in the process of trying to devalue her, he permanently repriced himself. Follow the logic all the way down because it is airtight. If the claim were true, he would have produced documentation, and the case would be closed. He produced an engineering credit instead. So the claim, by his own retreat, does not have documentation behind it. Which means one of two things is now permanently true about him in this industry, and both of them are catastrophic. Either he made a professional accusation of that magnitude against a Grammy-nominated lyricist without the paper to back it, which tells every A&R, every publisher, every executive, and every artist in this business exactly how much weight to give his word in a room where money is being divided. Or the work was collaborative in the ordinary way that all rap is collaborative, and he chose to weaponize a marriage's creative intimacy as a public bargaining chip during a divorce, which tells the same room something even worse about what happens to people who build with him. There is no third door. And that is why the phrase career over is not a thumbnail flourish in this specific case. Papoose has never been a commercial artist. That was never the pitch. He was never selling units. He was selling integrity. The loyal husband, the technician, the mixtape purist, the guy who stayed when nobody stays, the last honest pen in New York. That was the entire brand. Every booking, every executive seat, every satellite radio slot, every ounce of goodwill in this culture was underwritten by that one intangible. And integrity is the only asset in this business that cannot be re-signed, renegotiated, or re-released. You cannot put out a mixtape that restores it. You cannot drop a diss record that wins it back, and he tried, twice, against a man who eats this for breakfast. So watch what he actually does versus what he says, because the receipts are never in the statements, they are in the omissions. He will not produce the split sheets. He will not produce a final decree. He will not explain what is outstanding in a case his wife offered to pay to close. He will not defend the 90% claim on the merits. He will not sit for the one interview where somebody asks a factual question about the docket. Instead, this month, he offered the culture the softest possible landing. No animosity, I wish her the best. The accusations do not even add up when you look at the history. And I want everybody to understand what that sentence actually is, stripped of tone. That is a man who spent 20 months telling the world his wife was a narcissist and a serial cheater, standing on a national platform and testifying, voluntarily, that the record does not support the story he sold. That is not closure. That is a retraction wearing a nice outfit. And the reason it lands like a confession is because that is precisely what it is. A confession that the villain arc was content, the ghostwriting claim was leverage, and the whole 2-year performance was a man trying to hold onto the only thing he ever actually owned, which was his reputation, by spending it. He spent it. It is gone. And the culture watched the transaction clear in real time. Which brings us to the person who has been quietly winning this entire time without ever needing a couch, a camera, or a caption war, and her name is Remy Ma. Walk it back through with me, because the contrast is almost too clean to be real. She was publicly humiliated in December of 2024. Her marriage was disassembled on Instagram in front of millions. Her authorship, the one thing a rapper truly owns, was publicly challenged by the man who knew exactly how much that would hurt. And here is what she did with it. She offered to pay for her own divorce and asked for nothing. Not child support, not assistance, nothing. Then she went to work. She got on Connie Diamond's head tap and established the hierarchy in 4 bars. She jumped on the Ever Since You Left Me Big Bronx remix with French Montana and Max B. She starred in a Lifetime feature. On April 10th of this year she walked into On the Radar and delivered WYFL, a freestyle that reportedly pulled over 90,000 comments on the initial reel alone and dismantled the ghostwriting claim so efficiently that the claim itself has now been abandoned by the person who made it. And then last month she did the thing that actually ends stories like this. She stopped talking about him entirely and put out Put Him On, a summer single produced by Juice, released through DNA Music Group, 20 years after her debut album. And listen to what she said about it, because this is the whole video in one quote. People expect her music to be angry or super aggressive, because for a long time that is the narrative she let people believe, but in this season she is literally having the most fun she has had in her life. That is what winning sounds like. Not a rebuttal. A release schedule. One person spent 2 years assembling a story and had to retract it on national radio. The other person spent 2 years assembling a catalog and does not have to explain a single bar of it. One of them needed a microphone to prove he was fine. The other one needed a studio because she already was. And here is the part that should give everybody watching some genuine faith, because it is not karma, and it is not luck, and it is not the internet picking a side. It is structural. Documentation always outlasts narration. Remy Ma's position is unassailable for one boring, unglamorous reason. Everything she claimed can be checked, and everything he claimed had to be believed. She said everything is signed, checkable. She said she would pay for it. She said it on camera. She said he never wrote anything for her or anybody, and the absence of a single split sheet to the contrary is louder than any bar she could have written. He said 90%, and then said engineer. That is the whole story. The receipts destroyed the story because the story was never built on receipts, and this is the lesson I want everybody to take out of this video and use in their own life. The person telling the truth never has to change their version. And this is only the opening chapter, because there are 2 specific developments coming that will reframe everything you just heard, and I need you watching for both of them. Development 1 is the decree. At some point that case closes, and when the final paperwork surfaces, the timeline becomes public in a way that no podcast appearance can manage. The dates, the delays, the filings, the settlement terms. And when that lands, every single interview from the last 14 months gets replayed in a completely different light, including the one from this month where he said there was no animosity. Development 2 is Remy's rollout. Put M on is not a one-off, it is a positioning record, and a woman who just re-emerged with a new label situation 20 years after her debut is not building toward a single. If WYFL was the warning, the project is the sentence, and when a lyricist of her caliber decides to stop answering and start documenting, that is when catalogs get rewritten. There is also a third thread I am tracking quietly, which is what happens to the reported $8 million label situation if the couple's public alignment ever shifts, because business relationships with romance holding them together have a very specific failure mode, and I have seen this movie in this industry more times than I can count. If you made it this far, you are genuinely the reason I do this, so do me a favor and subscribe, because I am going to be here for every filing, every bar, every podcast walkback, and every receipt. And before you go, watch the next one, because it is bigger than this. There is a mechanism in this culture where an artist's entire authorship can be quietly reassigned during a personal dispute, and it has happened to more legendary female MCs than anybody has ever put in one place. I pulled the pattern, I pulled the names, and I pulled the paper. And when you see how many times this exact play has been run, and who has been running it, you are going to understand that what happened to Remy Ma this year was not a domestic argument. It was a template. Click that one now. That is my read, and I will stand on it.